The massive chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with hundreds of alien voices speaking in dozens of different languages. Jake Morrison stood alone in the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back as he waited for the final judgment. Around him, representatives from 47 different species watched from their floating platforms, their strange eyes fixed on the human ambassador. Jake had been Earth's voice in the galaxy for 12 years. He had negotiated trade deals, settled disputes, and built relationships that had helped humanity find its place among the stars. Now all of that work was about to be destroyed by a single decision. The Zephyrian judge floated above the assembly, his tentacles wrapped around a glowing crystal that contained the council's verdict. His translator device crackled to life, filling the chamber with perfectly clear English words that would change everything for humanity. The species known as humans has been found guilty of excessive aggression, unpredictable behavior, and violation of 17 galactic peace accords, the judge announced. His voice echoed through the chamber like a death sentence. The Council hereby sentences the entire human race to permanent exile on Kepler 442c, a Class 0 Deathworld. The reaction was immediate. Even among the alien diplomats who had voted for this punishment, there were gasps of shock. Assignment to a Class 0 world was considered the worst fate that could befall any living being. These planets were so hostile that no known species had ever survived on them for more than a few months. Dr. Lisa Grant felt her tablet slip from her hands as the words sank in. She was humanity's chief xenobiologist, and she knew exactly what Class 0 meant. She had studied the classification system for years, had read reports on dozens of failed colonization attempts. The data was always the same: total extinction within one standard galactic year. Kepler 442c was a nightmare made real. The planet's surface temperature swung from -40 degrees to +60 degrees Celsius in a matter of hours. The atmospheric pressure was 3 times what humans were used to, and the air itself was filled with sulfur compounds that would burn the lungs with every breath. The gravity was 40% stronger than Earth's, and the ground shook constantly with earthquakes that could level cities. But the worst part was the atmosphere. It contained just enough oxygen to keep humans alive, but not enough to let them thrive. Every breath would be a struggle, every day a fight for survival that they would eventually lose. Your species will be given exactly 1 standard galactic year to evacuate your homeworld, the judge continued. Transport vessels will be provided. No technology above Class 3 civilization level will be permitted. Captain Ryan Butler felt his hands clench into fists. He represented Earth's military forces, and he understood what Class 3 technology meant better than anyone. No faster than light travel except for the one-way trip to exile. No advanced weapons to defend themselves. No terraforming equipment to make their new world livable. They were being sent to die slowly and alone. The alien representatives began filing out of the chamber, many of them casting what looked like sympathetic glances at the human delegation. But sympathy wouldn't save 12 million people from certain death. Zix Thara, the Altarian representative, approached Jake as the chamber emptied. The crystalline being's form reflected the chamber's lights in rainbow patterns as she spoke. I am sorry, Ambassador Morrison. Many of us argued for a lesser sentence. But your species' recent conflicts with the Drakmori hegemony made the Council afraid. They fear what humans might become if left to grow stronger. Jake nodded slowly. The humans had indeed fought back when the Drakmori had tried to enslave human colonies on the frontier worlds. But their methods had been effective in ways that apparently made the galaxy nervous. Humans had a talent for finding creative solutions to impossible problems, and in warfare, that creativity had proven devastating. What happens to Earth after we leave? Jake asked. It will be monitored by automated systems. Your species will be forbidden to return. If any humans are found in galactic space after the exile period, they will be destroyed on sight. The next 12 months passed like a fever dream. Every human settlement, every space station, every colony world had to be evacuated. 12 million people had to be transported to a world that would kill them all. But humans were nothing if not resourceful. Engineer Ben Carter led teams that worked around the clock to modify their limited technology. They couldn't use advanced equipment, but they could hide sophisticated components inside primitive frameworks. They couldn't bring terraforming machines, but they could bring the knowledge to build them from raw materials. Dr. Susan Walsh organized medical teams that developed new treatments and survival protocols. If they were going to die on Kepler 442c, they would at least die fighting. The transport ships were massive cargo vessels, stripped of all comfort to make room for as many people as possible. Families were separated, communities broken apart, but somehow they all kept moving toward their shared doom. Captain Butler stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, the last transport ship to leave Earth. Through the view screen, he could see his homeworld growing smaller in the distance. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. Everything that had made life possible for humanity was being left behind forever. All 12 million humans accounted for. "Sir," reported Colonel Amy Stevens, checking her tablet one final time. "The colony ships have already begun landing operations on Kepler 442c. Butler nodded without speaking. His throat felt too tight for words. Earth would remain behind them, beautiful and empty, watched over by alien machines that would destroy any human who tried to return. The journey to Kepler 442c took 3 months. During that time, the humans organized themselves into survival groups, shared knowledge, and prepared for what was waiting for them. Children born on the transport ships would never see Earth except in pictures. They would grow up on a world that wanted them dead. When the New Horizon finally entered orbit around Kepler 442, Butler got his first real look at humanity's new home. The planet was a swirling mass of brown and gray clouds, broken by the angry red glow of volcanic activity. Lightning storms the size of continents raged across the surface, and the whole world seemed to pulse with violent energy. "Beginning final descent," announced the pilot. "All passengers prepare for landing." Butler gripped the rail of the observation deck as the ship shuddered through the planet's atmosphere. Around him, families held each other close, knowing that this might be their last peaceful moment together. The ship touched down on a rocky plateau surrounded by steam vents and sulfur pools. Through the view screen, Butler could see the other transport ships scattered across the landscape, their hulls already showing signs of corrosion from the hostile atmosphere. As the airlock opened and the first human stepped onto the surface of Kepler 442c, Butler made a silent promise. The galaxy had sent them here to die, but humans had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters. They had spread across Earth's most hostile environments and made them home. Maybe, just maybe, they could do the same thing here. The first winter on Kepler 442c killed 2,000 people. Governor Alex Turner stood in the main shelter of Settlement 1, watching the death count climb on his damaged computer screen. Every name represented a family destroyed, a life cut short by the planet that the humans had started calling Forge. The Henderson family had died when their shelter collapsed during an earthquake. The Williamson children had been caught outside during a thermal storm that raised the temperature to deadly levels in minutes. The Martinez clan had simply vanished one night when the ground opened up beneath their camp and swallowed them into the planet's molten core. Turner rubbed his tired eyes and tried to focus on the numbers. They had started with 12 million people. Now they were down to 9,800,000. The math was simple and terrible. At this rate, humanity would be extinct within 5 years. Another seismic event in Sector 7, reported Dr. Emily Rodriguez from her position at the Geological Monitoring Station. The Chen family shelter took a direct hit. No survivors. Turner closed his eyes and added 4 more names to the list of the dead. The Chens had been farmers from Iowa, good people who had volunteered to help establish the agricultural programs. Their expertise was now lost forever. Outside the main shelter, Forge was showing its teeth again. The temperature had dropped 30 degrees in the past hour, and the wind was picking up speed. Soon another thermal storm would sweep across the landscape, bringing with it temperatures that could cook human flesh in seconds. But humans were learning to read the signs. Commander Kelly Wright had taken charge of the survival training programs, and under her guidance, people were starting to understand their new world. The way the wind changed direction before a thermal storm, the subtle vibrations in the ground that warned of earthquakes hours before they struck, the color of the sky that meant a radiation surge was coming. "We're not trying to fight this planet," Wright explained to a group of new arrivals from Transport Ship 7. These people had just stepped off their ship and onto Forge's surface for the first time. Their faces showed the same shock and fear that everyone felt when they first experienced the Deathworld's fury. "This planet has killed everything that ever tried to fight it. We're going to survive by learning to work with it instead of against it." The lessons were hard and often deadly. People learned to recognize the warning signs of atmospheric poisoning When they started coughing blood, they learned to feel the ground tremors that meant a lava tube was about to erupt beneath their feet. They learned to read the electromagnetic patterns that could fry their equipment without warning. But slowly, gradually, humans began to adapt. Not just mentally, but physically as well. Dr. Marcus Chen was a marine biologist who had been studying the few life forms that managed to exist on Forge. In the deep thermal vents, he found bacterial colonies that thrived in conditions that should have killed them instantly. These tiny organisms seemed to use radiation as an energy source and convert toxic gases into nutrients. "Look at this," Chen called to his research partner, Dr. Jennifer Kim, as they worked in their mobile laboratory. The lab was really just a reinforced shelter with some basic equipment, but it was the best they could manage on Forge. These bacteria aren't just surviving the heat and radiation, they're actually using it to grow and reproduce. If we could somehow learn from their biological processes, maybe even incorporate some of their mechanisms into human biology. The idea was controversial. Many people were afraid of changing their DNA, worried that they would lose what made them human. But when the alternative was certain death, volunteers stepped forward. Dr. Patricia Bell was one of the first to undergo genetic modification. The process was crude compared to what they could have done on Earth, but it worked. Her cells were altered to better process radiation and to handle temperature extremes that would kill a normal human. The first test came during a thermal storm that hit Settlement 3. While everyone else huddled in the deepest shelters, Belle walked outside and stood in the superheated wind. Her modified skin turned red and began to sweat heavily, but she survived conditions that would have cooked an unmodified human in minutes. Word of the success spread quickly through the settlements. More volunteers came forward, and the modifications became more sophisticated. Humans developed stronger bones to handle Forge's heavy gravity. Their lungs changed to process the thick, toxic atmosphere more efficiently. Their digestive systems learned to extract nutrition from native plants that had been poisonous before. But the most important changes were happening in the children. Kids who had been born on Forge seemed to adapt naturally to conditions that killed adults. 8-year-old Jimmy Preston could lift weights that would challenge a grown man back on Earth. 12-year-old Sandra Lopez could run across Forge's rocky terrain without breathing hard, her enhanced cardiovascular system working perfectly in the heavy atmosphere. Captain Butler, now serving as military coordinator for all the settlements, watched these children with amazement and growing hope. They moved with easy grace in the crushing gravity. They could see clearly in conditions that left adults stumbling blind. They seemed to sense atmospheric changes hours before the monitoring equipment detected them. "They're not just adapted," Butler said to Dr. Grant during one of their weekly planning meetings. "They're optimized for this place." Grant nodded, her own modifications allowing her to see deeper into the infrared spectrum. This helped her navigate during Forge's frequent dust storms when normal vision was useless. The second generation is even more remarkable. The babies being born now show genetic changes that we never programmed. It's like the planet itself is teaching their DNA how to survive. The settlements were changing too. What had started as crude shelters dug into the rock were becoming sophisticated underground cities. The humans learned to use Forge's thermal vents for power, its mineral deposits for construction materials, and even its violent weather patterns to help process the atmosphere. Settlement 5 had figured out how to tap directly into the planet's electromagnetic field for energy. Settlement 2 had developed farming techniques that used Forge's toxic soil to grow food crops that were actually more nutritious than anything they had grown on Earth. Settlement 8 had learned to predict and harness the seismic activity, using controlled earthquakes to mine valuable materials from deep underground. Turner stood at the observation deck of Settlement 1's command center, looking out at the harsh landscape that was slowly becoming home. In the distance, he could see the lights of Settlement 4, its thermal processors working steadily to create breathable air. Closer to home, children were playing in the settlement's central cavern, their laughter echoing off the rocky walls. These kids had been born into hell, but to them, this was simply the world. They knew no other life, and they were thriving in ways that amazed their parents every day. "Population report, sir," said Colonel Stevens, joining him at the window. "We're up to 10,200,000. Turner blinked in surprise. "Up? But the death toll is dropping faster than the birth rate is climbing. The new modifications are working, Alex. People aren't just surviving anymore. They're having families, building futures. The planet that was supposed to kill us is making us stronger. Outside, another thermal storm was building on the horizon, its heat shimmer visible even from their underground vantage point. But Turner no longer felt the old fear when he saw those storms. His people had learned to dance with this world's fury, and in doing so they had become something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that could survive anywhere. 5 years had passed since the last human transport ship left Earth, and Forge had become something nobody expected. What started as a death sentence was turning into humanity's greatest achievement. The planet that was supposed to kill them was making them stronger than they had ever been before. Dr. Kevin Ross stood before the assembled leaders of all 12 settlements, his presentation showing genetic charts that would have amazed scientists back on Earth. His own body showed the signs of adaptation to Forge. His skin had a slight metallic sheen that helped reflect radiation, and his voice was deeper and stronger, adapted to carry clearly through the thick atmosphere. The genetic changes are happening faster than we ever thought possible, Ross explained to the gathered leaders. The children born here aren't just surviving. They're perfectly designed for this world. Mayor Linda Carter of Settlement 3 leaned forward in her chair. Like most of the leadership, she had undergone moderate genetic changes. Her bones were denser, her muscles more efficient, but she still looked mostly human. The children were different. What exactly does that mean for our future, Doctor? Ross smiled with more confidence than anyone would have expected from people living on a death world. It means we're not just getting by anymore. We're becoming the dominant species on this planet. The evidence was everywhere. 10-year-old Bobby Williams could carry equipment that would challenge 3 adults back on Earth. 15-year-old Maria Santos could run for hours across Forge's rocky landscape without getting tired. The teenagers could work outside during thermal storms that would cook unmodified humans in minutes. But the changes went beyond just physical strength. The children seemed to understand Forge in ways that amazed their parents. They could sense weather changes days before they happened. They knew where to dig for water by feeling vibrations in the ground. They could navigate through dust storms that left adults completely lost. Engineer Tony Mitchell had developed this kind of intuitive understanding better than most adults. He could feel seismic events days before they occurred, sensing the planet's stress patterns through tiny vibrations that his enhanced nervous system could detect. His modifications had been extensive, giving him almost supernatural awareness of Forge's geological activity. The planet talks to us, Mitchell explained to a group of visitors from Settlement 7. You just have to learn how to listen. This wasn't mystical thinking. It was evolution happening in real time. Humans were developing a partnership with their hostile world, learning to read its patterns and moods in ways that let them not just survive, but predict and prepare for its many dangers. The settlements themselves showed this evolution. Settlement 1 had grown from a simple cave system into a sprawling underground city that worked with Forge's natural systems. The humans had learned to channel the planet's thermal vents for power, use its mineral deposits for construction, and even harness its violent weather patterns for atmospheric processing. Settlement 4 had become a marvel of biological engineering. The humans there had learned to grow food using Forge's toxic soil, creating crops that were more nutritious than anything they had grown on Earth. The plants they developed could process radiation and convert atmospheric toxins into useful nutrients. Captain Butler stood in the war room of Settlement 1, looking at displays that showed the current status of all human settlements on Forge. The room had been carved from a natural crystal formation that actually helped amplify their communication signals across the planet, sir, reported Lieutenant Commander Rachel Martinez. We're detecting unusual activity in the outer system. Long-range sensors are picking up artificial objects that don't match any of our equipment. Butler frowned and studied the display. They had been expecting this moment for years. The Galactic Council had sentenced humans to death on this world, and they would eventually want to check if their sentence had been carried out. What kind of objects? Butler asked. Configuration suggests observation vessels, probably council ships doing a survey to see if we're all dead yet. Colonel Stevens joined them at the tactical display. They're going to be very surprised by what they find. What the alien observers would discover would indeed shock them. Instead of the barren wasteland dotted with human graves they expected, they would find a thriving civilization that had not only survived Forge's challenges, but had used them to become something entirely new. In the residential areas of Settlement 1, families like the Roberts clan were raising children who represented the future of humanity. 16-year-old Jake Roberts could see clearly in near-total darkness. His enhanced eyes adapted to Forge's frequent dust storms. His sister Amy could sense electromagnetic fluctuations that warned of equipment failures hours before they happened. Dr. Angela Foster, who ran the education programs for all the settlements, watched 14-year-old Danny Kim solve engineering problems that would have challenged university graduates back on Earth. His brain, adapted to process the complex sensory information needed for survival on Forge, had developed analytical abilities that far exceeded normal human capacity. "The children are becoming something extraordinary," Foster reported to Governor Turner during their weekly meeting. "Their problem-solving abilities, their physical capabilities, their intuitive understanding of complex systems. We're not just adapting to Forge anymore, Alex. We're evolving into something beyond what humanity was before." Turner nodded thoughtfully. He had been thinking the same thing for months. The question that kept him awake at night was whether they were still human, and if it mattered. What mattered was that they were alive, thriving, and growing stronger every day. The modifications had become routine now. Newborn babies received genetic adjustments that helped them thrive in Forge's environment. Adults could choose from a menu of enhancements that improved their survival capabilities. The most popular modifications included enhanced bone density for the heavy gravity, improved lung efficiency for the thick atmosphere, and radiation resistance for the frequent energy storms. But the most remarkable development was happening at the genetic level, without any artificial intervention. Children born to Forge-adapted parents showed natural abilities that nobody had programmed. They were developing enhanced reflexes, improved pattern recognition, and even a form of electromagnetic sensitivity that let them interface directly with some of Forge's natural systems. Dr. Helen Price, who led the Biological Research Division, had been documenting these spontaneous changes with growing excitement. "The neurological developments are the most fascinating," she explained to her research team. "Enhanced memory, improved processing speed, and something that can only be described as collective awareness. The children seem to share information in ways we don't fully understand yet." This collective awareness was already proving invaluable. When Settlement 9 was threatened by an unexpected volcanic eruption, the children throughout the settlement network somehow sensed the danger hours before any monitoring equipment detected it. The early warning saved thousands of lives. Settlement 12 had developed the most advanced technology, using principles that combined human engineering with an understanding of Forge's unique properties. They had created atmospheric processors that not only cleaned the air but actually improved it. Their power systems tapped directly into planetary energy, sources that provided more electricity than all of Earth's power plants combined. As the Council observation vessel completed its initial scans from the edge of the system, Captain Butler stood at his command center knowing that everything was about to change. The galaxy had tried to kill humanity by exiling them to a Deathworld. Instead, they had created something that would terrify them far more than baseline humans ever could. The children playing in Settlement 1's caverns represented the future. They were humanity evolved, adapted, and optimized for survival in conditions that would kill any other known species. They were strong, intelligent, and perfectly suited for a universe that had tried to destroy them. Soon the galaxy would discover what they had created. And when they did, everything would change forever. Council member Veltar of the Zephyrian Hegemony read the observation report for the 4th time, his tentacles curling and uncurling in disbelief. Around the curved council chamber on Nexus Prime, representatives from 47 species waited for his assessment of the human colony's status. The silence in the room was heavy with tension and growing fear. "This cannot be accurate," Veltar finally spoke, his voice carrying through the electronic translators to every being present. "The report claims not only survival, but population, growth, and technological advancement beyond what should be possible." Admiral Crixon of the Altarian fleet stepped forward, her crystalline form catching the chamber's light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. "The sensor data has been verified by 3 independent monitoring stations, Council member. The humans have not only survived on Kepler 442c, they appear to be thriving in ways that defy our understanding of biological limitations." A wave of concern rippled through the assembly. Species that had lived for thousands of years, that had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations, were looking at data that challenged everything they thought they knew about survival and adaptation. High Counselor Threxmal, the ancient Drakmori who had pushed hardest for human exile, spoke with barely contained anger. His scaled hide showed the stress patterns that indicated extreme agitation among his species. Impossible. Class 0 worlds have a 100% mortality rate for all known sentient species. Nothing survives on Deathworlds. We have tested this with condemned criminals from dozens of species over the centuries. But the evidence was undeniable. The observation vessel Harmony of Worlds had detected energy signatures consistent with a major technological civilization. The atmospheric processors were working at efficiency levels that suggested complete mastery rather than desperate survival. Population centers appeared to be expanding rather than shrinking, and the heat signatures indicated millions of living beings. There is more disturbing news, Veltar continued, accessing the deeper analysis data. The humans appear to have undergone rapid biological adaptation. Our bioscanners are detecting physiological signatures that do not match baseline human parameters. Some of the readings suggest capabilities that exceed any known species. This announcement sent a wave of alarm through the chamber. Rapid evolutionary adaptation was theoretically possible, but no species had ever demonstrated it in real time across an entire population. The implications were staggering and terrifying. Dr. Sylveth, the Council's chief xenobiologist and one of the few beings who had argued against human exile, stood to address the assembly. Her insectoid form clicked nervously as she spoke. Honored colleagues, I must remind you that humans demonstrated remarkable adaptability even before their exile. Their homeworld contained environments ranging from frozen wastelands to burning deserts, from crushing ocean depths to oxygen-thin mountain peaks. No other known species evolved on a world with such extreme environmental diversity. Are you suggesting, Threxmal interrupted, his voice rising to a dangerous pitch, that we have merely made them stronger? Dr. Sylveth's response was measured but carried an undertone of deep concern. I am suggesting that we may have accidentally created something unprecedented in galactic history. A species specifically adapted to survive in conditions that would instantly kill any of us. The debate that followed was heated and desperate. Some council members argued for immediate military action before the humans could become an even greater threat. Others pointed out that attacking a species they had already tried to destroy might provoke exactly the kind of response they feared most. Meanwhile, on Forge, the humans were completely unaware that their every move was being monitored and analyzed by increasingly worried alien observers. In Settlement 1, Dr. Charles Gray was putting the finishing touches on a project that would have seemed impossible just 5 years earlier. The atmospheric processors are running at 115% efficiency, Gray reported to the Engineering Council. We're not just making the air breathable anymore. We're actually creating an atmosphere that's better than what we had on Earth. The room filled with quiet satisfaction. Chief Engineer Sarah Murphy, whose genetic modifications allowed her to interface directly with Forge's electromagnetic fields, smiled at the achievement. Her neural implants let her monitor and control planetary systems with thought alone. More importantly, Murphy added, we've figured out how to tap into the planetary core's energy output. Our power generation now exceeds what the entire Earth civilization had access to before our exile. This was the reality that was slowly becoming clear to both humans and their observers. Exile to a death world had not weakened humanity. It had forced them to transcend every limitation they had ever accepted about what was possible. In the military compounds, Colonel Stevens was reviewing reports that would have seemed like fantasy to her former colleagues back on Earth. Sergeant Mike Torres, a third-generation Forge native, had just completed a training exercise that involved carrying a wounded comrade up a vertical cliff face while wearing full combat gear. In Forge's heavy gravity, this represented a feat of strength that would have been impossible for any baseline human. Ma'am, Torres reported, not even breathing hard despite the extreme exertion. The new recruits are adapting to advanced training protocols ahead of all projections. We estimate full operational readiness within 4 months instead of the projected year. Stevens nodded, but her mind was on larger implications. They now had soldiers who could operate effectively in environments that would kill members of any other known species within minutes. In terms of military capability, they had become something the galaxy had never encountered before. But perhaps the most significant development was happening in the research facilities, where Dr. Helen Price was documenting changes that went far beyond mere physical adaptation. The neurological modifications are the most remarkable, Price explained to her research team. Enhanced pattern recognition, improved memory integration, and most significantly, what can only be described as distributed consciousness. The Forge-born humans are developing a form of collective awareness that allows them to share information and coordinate actions in ways that appear almost telepathic. This collective awareness was already proving invaluable for survival, but its potential applications were staggering. Humans were becoming capable of processing and responding to complex information in ways that gave them advantages no other species possessed. The children demonstrated this most clearly. 15-year-old Katie Brooks could sense atmospheric disturbances 3 days before they occurred. 12-year-old Peter Kim could navigate through underground tunnel systems he had never seen before, somehow knowing exactly where to go. 8-year-old Lisa Chen could predict equipment failures hours in advance, sensing stress patterns in metal and electronics that no instrument could detect. As the Council's observation vessel prepared to depart with its comprehensive report, Captain Butler stood in Forge's primary command center, unaware that he and his people were about to become the subject of intense galactic scrutiny once again. "Any change in the alien vessel's position?" Butler asked Lieutenant Martinez. "The ship has moved to the extreme edge of the system, sir. Long-range telemetry suggests they're preparing for faster-than-light departure. They've been scanning us for 3 weeks." Butler nodded grimly. He had expected this moment would come eventually. The galaxy would want to know what had become of their attempt to eliminate humanity through exile to a Deathworld. Soon, they would have their answer. The data being transmitted back to the Galactic Council would show that humanity had not only survived their death sentence, but had used it to evolve into something that challenged every assumption about biological limitations and adaptive capability. When the Council learned what they had accidentally created, the fear that had led to human exile would seem trivial compared to what they felt then. They had tried to destroy humanity, and had instead forged them into the most formidable species the universe had ever seen. The galaxy was about to discover that their worst nightmare was not what humans had been, but what they had become. 3 years after the Galactic Council's shocking observation report, the galaxy had changed completely. Fear of the Forge humans had spread through every civilized system like a plague, leading to massive military buildups, desperate defensive pacts, and increasingly frantic attempts to develop weapons that could stop a threat that existed more in imagination than reality. It was against this backdrop of galactic panic that the FRS Resilience entered normal space at the edge of the Sol system, its hull bearing the new flag of the Forge Republic. Captain Nathan Wright, grandson of the legendary Kelly Wright, stood on the bridge of humanity's first faster-than-light vessel in nearly a decade. The ship itself was a marvel that would have confused alien engineers. Every component met the Class 3 technology restrictions that had been placed on humanity during their exile, but the way those components worked together defied conventional understanding. The Forge humans had learned to achieve impossible results using simple tools, just as they had learned to thrive in conditions that should have killed them. "Sensor contact, Captain," reported Commander Lisa Park, her enhanced neural processing allowing her to interpret the tactical display with superhuman speed. Her modifications were visible in the slight glow behind her eyes and the metallic sheen of her skin. Multiple Galactic Council vessels in defensive formation around Earth. Configuration suggests they've been expecting us. Wright smiled grimly. The Forge Republic had been monitoring galactic communications for months, watching as fear of their return spread through the council chambers like wildfire. The irony was not lost on him. The very exile meant to destroy humanity had created something that terrified the galaxy far more than baseline humans ever could have. "Open a channel to the lead vessel," Wright commanded. The view screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Crixon of the Altarian fleet. Her crystalline features showed clear signs of stress, and her usual diplomatic composure seemed strained to the breaking point. Behind her, Wright could see other alien officers moving with the nervous energy of beings who expected an attack at any moment. "Captain Wright of the Forge Republic," she began formally, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. "You are in violation of your species' exile decree. You must return to Kepler 442c immediately or face the consequences." Wright's response was calm but carried an undertone of steel that had not existed in human voices before Forge. His own modifications were subtle but visible to trained eyes. His movements were too fluid, his reflexes too quick, his presence too commanding for a baseline human. "Admiral, I am here to deliver a message from the Forge Republic to the Galactic Council. Humanity formally rejects the authority of any government that would condemn an entire species to death without just cause." The effect was immediate. On the Council command vessel, emergency alarms began sounding as sensors detected the true scope of the Forge fleet. What had appeared to be a single ship was revealed to be 15 vessels, their hulls designed using principles learned from surviving on a world that killed everything else. They moved through space with the same fluid cooperation that had allowed their crews to survive impossible conditions. "How is this possible?" Admiral Crichton demanded, her voice rising with panic. "Your species was restricted to Class 3 technology. These ships should not exist." Dr. Jennifer Kim, now serving as the Resilience's chief science officer, took over the communication. Her appearance would have shocked any baseline human. Her skin had a faint metallic sheen that reflected her cellular adaptations to Forge's radiation, and her eyes had developed an inner luminescence that allowed her to see in conditions of near total darkness. "We worked within your restrictions, Admiral. Every component of our vessels meets Class 3 specifications exactly. We simply learned to use them in ways you never imagined possible." This was the truth that was becoming terrifyingly clear to the galactic observers. The Forge humans had not violated the technology restrictions. They had transcended them completely. Their understanding of physics, biology, and engineering had evolved to a point where they could achieve results that seemed impossible using conventional methods. On Earth, in the chambers of the hastily convened Emergency Council session, panic was beginning to set in among representatives from across the galaxy. The humans were not just back. They had returned as something entirely new and utterly beyond previous understanding. President Alex Turner, formerly the governor of Settlement 1, stepped into view on the communication screen. His appearance was the most shocking transformation of all. While clearly still human, everything about him suggested someone who had been refined by extreme challenges into something approaching perfection. His movements were fluid and precise. His voice carried absolute confidence, and his eyes held the wisdom of someone who had stared death in the face every day for 8 years and emerged victorious. "Honored council members," Turner began, his words being transmitted across the galaxy through the emergency broadcast network. "8 years ago, you sentenced my people to death because you feared what we might become. Today, we have returned to show you exactly what we have become." The demonstration that followed was carefully planned to make a point without causing unnecessary destruction. The Forge fleet maneuvered through the Council's defensive formations with contemptuous ease, their ships moving in perfect coordination through weapon fields that should have destroyed them instantly. Their hulls, designed using principles learned from surviving on a Deathworld, absorbed energy attacks and converted them into fuel for their own systems. But the most impressive display came when the Resilience approached Earth itself. As the ship entered the atmosphere, it began to sing, a harmonic resonance that its Forge-adapted crew used to communicate with their vessel on a level that approached telepathy. The sound, transmitted across every communication frequency, was hauntingly beautiful and utterly alien to the galactic observers. "We did not return for conquest," Turner continued as the demonstration concluded and the fleet settled into a perfect defensive formation around Earth. "We returned to offer the galaxy something it has never had, a partner species that has been forged by adversity into something capable of surviving anywhere, under any conditions, against any threat." The implications were staggering. The humans were offering their expertise, their adaptations, their hard-won knowledge of survival in impossible conditions, but they were also making it crystal clear that they would never again submit to galactic authority or accept second-class status in the community of civilized worlds. High Counselor Threxmal, The architect of humanity's exile and now a broken figure haunted by what his decision had created, finally found his voice. "What do you want from us?" Turner's smile carried no warmth but also no malice. It was the expression of someone who held all the cards and knew it. Recognition of the Forge Republic as a sovereign nation with full rights and privileges. The immediate withdrawal of all monitoring equipment from the Sol system. The right to reclaim our homeworld without interference. And a formal apology for the attempted genocide of our species. The silence that followed stretched across star systems. The Galactic Council had never been presented with demands by a species they had tried to eliminate. The precedent was terrifying, but the alternative was even worse. Admiral Crixon looked at the displays showing the impossible capabilities of the Forge fleet. She considered the reports of human settlements that had turned a Class Zero Deathworld into a thriving paradise. She thought about the children being born on Forge who represented the next stage of human evolution. The galaxy had two choices: accept humanity as an equal partner in galactic civilization, or face a species that had been specifically evolved to survive anything the universe could unleash against them. "We will consider your requests," she finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Captain Wright nodded with calm satisfaction. "You have 72 hours to provide an answer. After that, the Forge Republic will consider itself free to pursue its own interests without regard for Council authority." The communication ended and the Forge fleet settled into orbit around their reclaimed homeworld. One fact became clear to every being in the galaxy. Humanity's exile to a death world had not destroyed them. It had created the most formidable species the universe had ever seen. And now they were home,